Susan Rice, the former UN ambassador under the Obama administration, national security advisor, and also served in various capacities with Joe Biden, gave an interview on a podcast with Preet Bharara. He is that very liberal federal prosecutor that developed quite a name for himself in New York, going after, I think, targeted a lot of people based on their politics. But nonetheless, it was one of the strangest interviews because she flat out, candidly, with no reservations, sent a message to people who were conservative, Republican, or Trump supporters. And she used Game of Thrones imagery. You've taken the knee to Donald Trump. You have allowed him to bully you. She was talking about the so-called elites in the academic world, in the corporate world, in the institutional world. And we're not going to forget, she says, that you did that. And you better have your documents ready, because when we come back into power, we're going to, the implication was, take you to court, make you pay, shake you. I don't know what she was talking about, but it was a direct threat. But here's what's strange about it. Start with Susan Rice herself. If you look back through her latter years with the Obama administration, it was nothing but a complete disaster. She was the one that you remember that the CIA and the Obama administration wheeled out on a Sunday afternoon to explain the Benghazi attack that killed the 4 Americans at the annex and the consulate. 5 times she told the American people that those attacks were spontaneous and they were because of some right-wing Coptic video maker who caused it all. That was not true. That was a pre-planned, either an Al-Qaeda or ISA or some type of radical Islamic pre-planned assault. People knew what they were doing. They were well armed. They were well organized. Why did she go out 5 times and mislead the American people? Because the Obama administration had been warned prior that their security was too lax, and they did not want to give the impression that that attack was preventable, which it was. She was the one that also assured us Americans that when Obama issued those red lines and said, if Bashar Assad and his Syrian forces move WMD around or still have it, that's going to be intolerable, i.e. I'm going to take it out. When they didn't do that and they backed out and we knew they had it, she lied to the American people and said essentially that they no longer had WMD. Remember also she wrote, just wrapping up her career, she wrote a little memo to herself in the last weeks of the Obama administration about Michael Flynn. She went to a meeting, and it was pretty clear in that meeting they had planned to subvert the incoming administration with the false narrative of Russian collusion, and that somehow Mike Flynn, the National Security Advisor designate, had been colluding with the Russians, but that was not true. But then she wrote a fake memo to herself suggesting that they hadn't really done that it was all up and up. And then, of course, she and others had requested the unmasking of people related with Trump in otherwise confidential files. So she doesn't have a good record. That's why she didn't have a high-profile position in the Biden administration. But there's also some real problems with what she said. She never said to corporate America, to the academic world, to the institutional world, to the political world, what they had done wrong. She just said, we're going to come back. People don't like Trump. It's our turn to come back. We're not going to play by the old rules. No. We're going to be tough. You better get your But what had they done? What had they done? If she's implying they let people off, or they laid people off that were associated with DEI, that was in accordance with the Supreme Court ruling barring race-based preferences in academic life. If she means that Donald Trump does not have the authority to issue an executive order stopping DEI, the whole idea of executive orders goes back to the beginning almost of the Republic. But more importantly, Barack Obama was the one who said, I have a pen and I have a phone and I'm going to use it. And that's when he lost control of the Congress, and he issued, up until that time, almost the greatest number of executive orders. So if she's not going to tell us why that anybody committed a a felony or misdemeanor, and yet she's going to punish them. That doesn't sound too legitimate. How does she know, secondly, that she's going to come back into power? The polls are very volatile. Donald Trump has made, as we've talked before, a vast investment in the economy. Inflation is down. Unemployment is down. GDP is solid. Foreign investment is at record levels. So is energy production. And when the big, beautiful bill is fully enacted and filters its way through the economy, you're going to see enormous stimuli given reductions in the tax code, reductions in the deductions that you have to make for the IRS, no tax on tips, etc. It's going to have an enormous effect, and it's going to come into effect before the midterms. We don't know what the world is going to look like abroad, in Ukraine, in Cuba, in Iran. It may be that Donald Trump is able to solve 2 or 3 or all of them. November's a long way away, so I wouldn't be so sure, Susan Rice, that you will win the November elections, much less if you were alluding, as I think you were, to 2028. If you heard Marco Rubio's speech to the Munich Security Conference, and you've seen J.D. Vance in the 2024 election take down almost every hostile reporter that interviewed him, they are going to be a very formidable team, and I don't see anything quite like that with Gavin Newsom. I don't see it with AOC, especially after a performance at the Munich Security Conference. I don't think Pete Buttigieg is a viable candidate. So we've seen Kamala Harris, very uninspiring. Maybe Josh Shapiro, but given the anti-Semitic nature of the new Democratic Socialist Party, I doubt, as we saw with the vice presidential selection in 2024, I doubt that he would have a chance to be the nominee of the new Democratic Party. And finally, when you talk about retribution, where have you been, Susan Rice? Who were the people who tried to take Donald Trump off 26 state ballots, unprecedented? Who were the people who, first time in history, impeached a president twice? Who were the people who tried him as a private citizen when he was out of office in the Senate, tried to convict him? Who were the people that were behind the Letitia James frivolous lawsuit that tried to bankrupt him with almost a $500 million fine because he took a loan out with a Deutsche Bank, and they claimed that he overvalued the assets, which the Deutsche Bank said he didn't. They paid the interest on time to the profit of the bank, who had no complaint. Who was Alvin Bragg trying to shoehorn a federal offense onto a state law and said that Donald Trump's non-disclosure with Stormy Daniels was a federal campaign violation? Who were the people behind the crazy E. Jean Carroll persecution lawsuit that may have cost Donald Trump $90 million? Who were the people behind Jack Smith, who was knee-deep along with the FBI and knew about that with Merrick Garland, the raiding the Mar-a-Lago, the home of Donald Trump, and the idea that Donald Trump violated some confidential agreement with the government when an archival dispute, when Joe Biden had taken materials that were confidential and classified from his days in the Senate in 3 or 4 much less secure places. Who was behind all that? Who was behind Fannie Willis when a person calls the registrar and says, I know there's votes there, find them, as a lot of candidates do to every registrar when they feel that they're not adequately looking for votes that have been cast. There was a lot of things to be suspicious about in Georgia, and turned that into a felony. All of those prosecutors were politically minded, biased, and ultimately found themselves in their own ethical dilemmas. But who did that? My point is, Susan Rice, your party has already taken out retribution. You were the ones that politicized the Department of Justice. You were the ones going back to 2015 and 16 with Russian collusion, 2020 with laptop disinformation. Your entire career of the Democratic Party, your career, Hillary Clinton's career, Barack Obama, has been to destroy Donald Trump. So we don't need lectures on retribution. You've already tried to practice retribution against Trump. And I don't think you're going to be in a position of power necessarily in the Congress in 2024 26, and I have a pretty good idea you won't come back to power in 2028.
I think Trump's already put a number of initiatives that are in progress, and he thinks that by the time of the midterms they're going to bear fruit. For example, Doug Burgum is leasing oil and gas in a rate we've never seen before. They haven't come into production yet, but he's on track to make us not only the present largest gas and oil producer, but the greatest oil producer by a large margin. And then when you look at Trump has invited in supposedly $10 trillion in foreign investment. Then he rounds up all of these guys that used to not like him in Silicon Valley and spent hundreds of millions of dollars to defeat him. And you look at what they have promised, you know, the Ken Andreessens, the Ben Horowitzes, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezos, they're all investing. And so he's kind of unleashed the floodgates, but we're not really seeing that yet because he just started to do it. And I think it's going to be something like World War II when, you know, 42, 43, we were really starting to gear up, but we weren't really out producing the Axis yet. But by 1945, we had a larger GDP than Germany, Italy, Japan, but also larger than our own allies, the British Empire and the Russians all put together. And that was, once you start that ball rolling, it's getting up the hill. I think he's almost at the summit. And then I would expect next year the foreign investment, the energy leases, the deregulation, and the courting of all of these, I don't know what you would call them, the Henry Fords of our age, the Thomas Edisons, the Henry Kaisers, the William Knudtsens. He's telling them, I will protect you from European regulation and censorship, but you just have to do one thing. Make money, don't outsource, keep it here, and you're going to have a whole new environment that you've never had before. And I think they're pretty excited about that. I think as he's trying to substitute class, middle class interest for race, and he's basically telling the Latino truck driver, the black carpenter, the white manufacturer guy on the assembly line, I'm going to make you all prosperous and you're going to have more in common with each other based on your shared interest as a powerful middle class, an American productive class, than you do differences because of your superficial appearances. And that's what's really frightened the left, because he got record numbers of Hispanic males and black males. And never any Republican had done that. And it was this idea that we're going to make you all rich in the middle, not rich, but prosperous, and you're going to have a lot of things in common, and your superficial appearance will be rendered irrelevant because we're going to get you the ability to buy cars and houses and good jobs. And I think it's a very nationalist, patriotic message that's inclusive. I was surprised, but I think he's trying to say, let no one say I didn't give Putin a chance. I bent over backwards. I wasn't his poodle or asset. I was trying to give him a chance to get out of a disaster that he created. But the problem is that Ukraine doesn't have the area, the population, or the GDP, nor do the Europeans, to go back and take all this in a really bloody offensive. They tried that in 2023, and it was a disaster. So what they can do is what they're doing now is very slowly creating defensive lines and bleeding out the Russians. And they're doing a very good job. But if they were to go on the offensive in this war of drones and obstacles, I don't think it would work, and they don't have the manpower to do it. I'd much rather see them just hold fast and wear out Putin. Let him be the offensive where all the casualties. There's a magic line, Larry, somewhere where there will be a DMZ, and we don't know where that is, but it's somewhere close now, where Putin will go back to the oligarchs and the military class and said, I got 100 miles, 50 miles, 80 miles, 110 of additional territory from where I started, and therefore it was worth 1.5 million Russian dead, missing, and captured. And he doesn't think he's there yet. I think he's not there yet because this was a colossal blunder on his part, and there's a lot of people angry about him. So he thinks he's basically telling us, I don't have enough territory yet to justify my mistake, and I'm going to get it. And so I think all Ukraine should do is rally NATO and arm themselves to the teeth and bleed Russia away. It's like World War I. You know, Passchendaele, the Somme, all of these Verdun, all of these offensives never worked until the Americans came in with 2 million people and overwhelmed the Germans, or they started to use tanks. But barring a technological breakthrough or a huge input of NATO manpower, and I don't see any of that happening, I would think that Ukraine would bleed itself white if it tried to have a massive offensive, and Russia would welcome that. There's still oil and gas on the European western continent. There's gas in France, there's still oil in the North Sea, there's still retrievable oil and gas if they'll just go after it. And they can go. They canceled the East Med pipeline. Israel, Cyprus, Greece, they were all ready to bring in natural gas right into southern Europe, and Biden, of course, and the Euros canceled it. But they just need the willpower, and I think Trump is trying to, jawbone them into doing that. But it'll take a while. But you can't feed the enemy, is what Trump is saying.
First question is it legal or not? Yes, it is legal. They have the right to redistrict this year. Number two, is gerrymandering confined to Texas or Republicans? No, all states do it. Number three, who's better at it, the Democrats or the Republicans? The Democrats are far better at it. If you take Illinois, where they fled to, Trump got about 45% of the vote. I think they have 3 out of, 20? 17 to 3, so they're underrepresented by 4 times. If you look at Massachusetts, where Trump got 40% of the vote, you would think that they would have 2 or 3, so they have none. Here in California, of the 53, I think we have 11 or 12, so we have about 20% of the House seats. Donald Trump got about 41%. So they're very good at it. So why are they angry and fleeing? They did this with Scott Walker, remember, about unionization, making unionization dues not mandatory. They all fled out of state. They always do this like adolescents. What we're watching is an adolescent meltdown. And I shouldn't say adolescent, that's not fair at all. It's a terrible twos. They had 3 children, and I remember once when I said to one of my children in the store, I know everybody's gone through this, you're not going to get Pop-Tarts. They were actually 4 or 5. They laid on their back and kicked up in the air. I want my Pop-Tart. Well, that's what they are. I mean, there's Cory Booker is screaming and yelling like Spartacus again for no reason. There's Hakeem Jeffries with his little club. Now they're hitting watermelons and smashing watermelons.